called to be the church, and most of us are the church in a workplace. That's what we get called to do. And I'm just really lucky because I get to be here with you and I get to talk about the things I love, okay? And you're going, woundedness is something you love? No, work is something I love. Woundedness is something we address, okay? So it's really a joy to be here. My goal is to have some opening comments and at some point move and transition a bit to talk about questions that you might have or ideas that you might have, and make this a little more interactive as we work through some of our ideas, okay? So I come to you as a practitioner. I'm not a theologian, I'm not an industrial psychologist, I'm a practitioner. And I've been working in the field of work and employment and people strategies in the business world for 40 years. I started young, I'll continue till old, okay? But that's where I spend my time. I spend my time primarily right now thinking about how to grow leaders and organizations, okay? What does that look like so people have a good work experience, a positive place to be as they use their gifts and skills in whatever place they're asked to be, okay? Be that the business world again or education, etc. So that's my lens. I'm a practitioner. And I come at this with what can we do? How can we think about this? What constructs can we develop to make the work world a better place? And to Teddy Ann's comments, I believe we're all created. Those students in the Build program, those individuals in their second or third career as they face less time in front of them than more time in front of them. What's our purpose in terms of using our gifts and skills that we've been given and being salt and light in the world and to be the church, okay? So that's the approach I'm going to take. I have three kind of agenda items that I just want to be overt about. Number one, that I give you a bit of an update on kind of how the world of work is looking today in a number of sectors, in all sectors, that we engage in some discussion about how can we address those pains and concerns, and how do we bring the church more into that and a construct to think about that, okay? I've given you a brief handout, more as visual cues to some of the things we're going to talk about. I'm a visual person. I like to see pictures, and it reminds me of stories and things to think about, okay? So woundedness, pain, scar tissue, some new, some old, some big, some little. Everywhere we go, there's the opportunity to interface and make better a scenario for those who are wounded, and the workplace is no different than that. In fact, it's where most of us gather, and we are with people who have wounds. Sometimes we are those people that have those wounds, okay? So, a couple of constructs to think about, some content to think about as we get started, okay? This is a big, meaty topic. We have 50 minutes. I could spend all week here and I'm willing to stay, okay? All right, we have 50 minutes to like scratch at and kind of poke at what some of those ideas are, all right? So some context about the workplace as I see it and in my experience, all right? I believe and have experienced that most people come to work ready to work, to be engaged, and to perform. And it's not necessarily on their radar screen that they won't do that, okay? But that their day will be about making a difference, whether they're teaching kindergarten in an elementary school, whether the CEO of an organization, a nurse or doctor in a hospital. That's the intent people come in with. And intent is really important because in this scenario, it grounds us to what we want to do and be in that workplace, okay? Some of us work to live, and some of us live to work. And you know, there used to be these big discussions about the value of work, and if you didn't live to work, that was a problem, and if you didn't work to live, that was a problem. Both are relevant, and that we have different views of that, kind of where we are in our life and what the opportunity looks like, okay? But those are big discussions at a point in time. Okay, is it okay to want to work so much? Is it okay to not want to work so much, but to feed the family and do the things that you want to do? Both are relevant, in my opinion. Conservatively, people spend a third of their life at work. 100,000 hours of their life, conservatively. That's based on some math that says people work approximately 40 hours of work and some a week and some compartmentalized view. And I say it's conservative because I don't know many people who work that way anymore. All right, we're in a country that wants to pass laws about can I email at night. Okay, we are not compartmentalized around work any longer. It just flows through. How many of you looked at your emails after 8 o'clock last night? Confession, right? How many of them looked at this morning? Right? Okay. Doesn't mean you spent a lot of time on it, but you're in roles with accountabilities that say someone might want to get a hold of me. And I'm going to be in, you may say to yourself, I'm going to be in meetings all day long today, and I want to be responsive. Does that sound familiar? So regardless of what role we have, we are spending way more than a third of our time at work, especially if you start thinking about when I'm thinking about work, when I'm planning for work, when I'm mulling about work, when I'm trying to solve a problem for work. So, big chunk of our time, okay? Lots of studies about the quality of sleep in this country. Less and less, not as restful. Can anyone relate to this? Okay. Shorter hours condense the market for things like Advil PM, okay, sleep aids, sleep masks, sleep machines, off the charts. And that sleep is just the thing to go as we're working more and more and wanting to have a full life, right? The problem with lack of sleep is we become more likely to have residual effects. Maybe we're more easily wounded. Maybe we get sick faster. Maybe we don't have as much patience with those who we're working with in terms of that dilemma. When I retired from being inside a corporation at Wells Fargo, I had to learn how to sleep again. I didn't know how to sleep, okay? I'd look at the wall and go, I don't have to set an alarm. I don't know what to do with that. I don't think I'm unusual at all. I think I'm the norm for people who are running with life. Leadership, management, supervision, incredibly important in the work world. And we can tie groups and teams and organizations with effective leadership and management that includes things like casting vision and giving feedback and being caring to the healthiness of individuals and groups overall. It doesn't account for everything, but it accounts for much in terms of there is a source of clarity that I have if my leader, my supervisor, and my manager is providing me that clarity, okay? Every sector is high stress. I'm going to tie that to a couple other things in here. Nationally, we are at full employment. Anything below 5% is full employment. That's a great thing. People are working, right? It's also not a great thing in that people are going to find barriers to a movement in their career, in their job, and a worry about what happens when we have an economic shift and we can no longer be at full employment. So whether you're high unemployment, at full employment, just right, there's always stresses about it. And every sector is stressed because every sector is being asked to do more with less, okay? I talked to an individual last week who said, everyone in my firm is working a job and a half, okay? I had a request or a suggestion from an individual who said, well, I don't know why the organization can't be more flexible and benevolent. Just give 10 people 10% of 10 people's jobs, or one person's job. So give everyone else 10% more, and then this person can take the leave they wanted to take or do what they need to do. And it's like, I'm not convinced that 10 people in the firm have 10% more capacity, okay? And to ask them, there might be a graciousness to say, I'll try, and a fear of failure, which creates the next set of issues. Mental health issues are growing. The opioid crisis is real. Employers are starting to look at this as an employment issue. I hail from Des Moines, Iowa. The best place to live, by the way, as noted recently in the media, okay? There are 5 major employers who have banned, you want to move, right? You want to join me in Des Moines? That have
Does
banned.
Iowa even have a lake? I mean, is there anywhere you can fish?
Well, now that's a value statement. That's a value statement. We have wildflowers. It's good. Actually, I'm a Minnesota native. It's a little hard without the lake. They're banding together to address the opioid crisis because of the huge impact it's having, not only to healthcare costs, but productivity and satisfaction. Okay? So when the employers start to get involved, it's moved from a healthcare only issue to a cross the sector issue in terms of things we need to address. On and on, okay? Things are happening in the workforce. It's a great time to be in the workforce. It's a hard time to be in a workforce. The reality is work is hard. Work is work. And with that comes all the stuff of being an employee who's probably working too much, and the myth of balance is quickly dissipating, all right? So balance used to look like a teeter-totter that said I put this much in at work and I put this much in the rest of my life, and now kind of looks like a scattergram, okay? It's no longer that opportunity to say I can be balanced. It's how do I juggle? How good are my juggling skills? Can I manage multiple things at once? Can I think about how I spend X amount of time to get a project done? Do I worry more about perfection or completion? And we iterate work more and more. Is that resonating with what you're hearing and seeing from folks? It's a very complex work world right now, okay? Very complex, all right? And within that, and on top of that, and through that, there's the reality that even though we go into work really well intended and feeling pretty whole, at some point in time, painful scenarios, painful wounds take place in the within work, and it's real, okay? And sometimes it surprises us, and sometimes it's subtle, and sometimes not. Sometimes it's right in our face, all right? I'm going to give you some stories in a minute. But if you look at your little diagram and you see the little triangle, you're all familiar with an iceberg, you know? We see the tip. In the middle I have slushiness, and then we're underwater. Depending upon where a person is in their trust, their resilience, their ability to articulate, we see some of that woundedness. And until we see it, whoever has the pen gets the spell. Okay, all right? Till we can see it and talk about it, we can't do much about it. And every time somebody who has some woundedness, some pain, some issue, steps out to do something with it, to heal from it, to resolve it, and they get a positive response, probably willing to show more, right? Get a negative response, we see less. And that the dilemma in the work setting, and actually I heard it in this room earlier, is there was some chatter going on where we want to be in charge of ourselves at work. We don't want to show our humanness very often as it relates to getting it done, being perfect, being the best performer, being the go-to person, right? Being the person that doesn't act wounded in spite of that woundedness, okay? So it's subtle. The realities are it exists. Woundedness exists. Not every day for everyone, but in reality it's there. It is also agnostic to level, gender, role, tenure, age. Everyone's got it, or the potential for it in terms of when you spend as much time at work, things happen. Couple stories. I had a first a month ago. I'd never heard a story like this before. I got a call from a woman named Jessica who I actually know, somebody she knows and was referred to me. I've never met Jessica face to face. I've had 2 or 3 phone calls with her at the request of a colleague, okay? And the first conversation, I'm actually driving from Minneapolis to Des Moines, which is my conference room, okay? And she went way down this because she was desperate. She was desperate. She got to what was underground really fast, okay? Here was her presenting problem. Julie, I have a problem. I have a job offer, okay? What's the problem with the job offer? Now, 99% of the time I hear they didn't offer me enough money, okay? Okay, so I'm ready for how we're going to learn how to negotiate compensation. That's where I think we're going. What's the problem? I think they're setting me up to fail. Why is that? They've offered me too much money. Never heard that before. Never heard that, okay? So tell me why you think they offered you too much money. They offered me a 12% increase from where I'm at. We all like that, right? I think maybe she was a little underemployed, okay? Why do you think that's a problem? Because my past employer would always offer me things and take them away as soon as I got to where I was supposed to be, okay? Well, Jessica, I can think about 5 good reasons why an employer would offer you a 12% increase. They're market priced. They have internal equity issues. You know, they want to bring you in at a place that you're going to be happy with for a period of time. And by the way, did they recruit you or did you go after them? Oh, they recruited me. They want you. So tell me about this pain. I have been so battered. She used the word battered at work around here's the treat, here's what we're going to give you. As soon as the work is done, pulled away. No trust for an employer, even a new employer who's offering good things. That's woundedness. And that's deep woundedness because she had spent 13 years at her last employer putting up with this. Just putting up with it because she was so battered. She didn't think she had a choice till someone came to find her to help her, right? Now I said, don't go in and renegotiate for less money. I said that would not be a wise step. But appreciate what they're offering you, validate it. Oh, I have it in writing. Validate it and start to learn how to let go and trust from your past experience, okay? Similar story the same week, all right? There's a young CEO that I do some work with. He's at a position in his life he never thought he'd be at this age, okay? Never, it's early, okay? He's learning every day and growing into it, all right? And almost after every meeting I'm with him, where I'm with him, he calls me afterwards and asks me, did I come on too strong? Did I come on too strong? Somewhere along the way, he's been given feedback that his personality or his voice is too big for the room, okay? And he's struggling with that, and it's impacting his performance. That's woundedness. It's woundedness, right? And it's impacting the performance. And it's impacting his ability to clearly see himself. It's impacting his ability to see, I've been given the opportunity to lead this organization, and yes, I need to be mindful of my presence and my power and my position, but everything can't be a second guess based on that woundedness. Is that fitting? Does that make some sense? Okay? So, it's there, it's real. So, but what might be a wound for me might not be a wound for you, okay? That's the need to manage the cues and the scenarios and all the history we bring into the workplace. And I will say, some workplaces are really good at that, and some leaders are really good at that. Many are not. They're good at moving work through. They're good at making decisions. They're good at driving for results. And then we have to step back and say, what does that look like in terms of woundedness in the workplace? And what's the impact to that pain and that scar tissue to the individual in terms of self-confidence, self-esteem, ability to produce? And what's the impact to the organization, which typically is anything from lots of energy invested to help someone be at a point of healing to performance issues. It's the whole gamut, all right? And again, I believe most people go into work, ready to work, fully engaged to perform, and something can happen. And it's usually that 80-20 rule. If you have 10 people on a team, it's not all 10 of them. It's a couple of them wrestling with something, right? But every time there's an impact to one in a team, it affects us all. Because someone either picks up the slack or gets engaged in the gossip or does some work like that. Okay? So those are the realities. There are impacts there. All right. We're humans. We go into work as humans. We react to things. People do silly things. They have bad behavior, right? And if you look at that little causes of workplace circle, those are just a few of them. They're there. Okay. Bad behavior is a big one. Okay. Bad behavior and loose lips, really a big problem for causes in the workplace of woundedness, causes of pain. Someone says something that's insensitive or does something that's inappropriate or talks about someone in the wrong place or criticizes without facts, and it becomes an appropriateness issue. So behavior's big. And let's just put that old elephant out there. The behavior that we're seeing in the workplace around inappropriate, severe behavior, in terms of misuse of power, expectations around relationships, how dynamics and space are, they're real, okay? They're real, and they're big, and they're a problem, and we deal with them in the workplace all the time. But so are the little caustic remarks that cause pain. And we have to deal with those. And so are the isms that slip out because we're naive, okay? The comments about race or ethnicity or faith, okay? I've been in a meeting where, meetings where people have said, well, if those born-again types, would just get their act together, I'm going, I thought my act was pretty together, why is this about faith, okay, or lifestyles or whatever? It's those little slips that cause people to just say, I am not valued here, okay, I am not appreciated, I'm not valued, am I in the right place? And then our purpose gets all squishy, right? Our productivity gets all squishy. Another huge piece that I see around the walking wounded, the unwillingness or inability for leaders to give timely and helpful feedback, okay? We are not all walking around so self-reflective that we know how either our performance or our behavior or our skills are impacting somebody. We just don't know, okay? And we go on and on and on about doing our work, and maybe something's not right, okay? So I learned early in my career, this became my motto. I will care enough about you to tell you. And this is the story of the wounded, okay? One of my first assignments in a role was to work with a group of leaders who are completing a battery of assessments. Okay, and they were hand-picked, and they come in, and we're going to work through this battery of assessments, and we're going to talk about their future, and it's going to be a good thing, because they were hand-picked, all right? The first leader I got their data the night before, and we're at a retreat center, and they're coming in, 10, one after another, right? First set of data I have to look at 8 o'clock in the morning, I open up the report, and you know those hospital monitors where everything's flat and there's no heartbeat? This leader's data was flat across every assessment on the bottom at 0. okay? 360 feedback across teams, individuals, buses, all kinds of batteries. Flat. I call the assessment center and I say, I think we have a data problem. Please let us have a data problem. I really want a data problem, okay? And they said, no, we checked it and double checked it, and this is what the message was, okay? So, okay, didn't sleep much that night. This leader comes in, pretty senior in the organization, a bank president of 5 or 6 banks, 30-year career, all right? Never, was told was handpicked, okay? Also had the data, came in, sat down across from me, put the document on the table, and you know, I expected anger. This is what I got. This is the woundedness. Why didn't anyone ever tell me? Burst into tears, walked out of the room, walked out of the training session. We actually put him on suicide watch, okay? He retired over the weekend and never came to work. I see that every day in the workforce. Why didn't someone ever tell me? Why didn't I know? I lived with the no news is the good news, okay? And this is true whether it's at work or school or in the church or whatever, that we're easy to have an opinion, but it's difficult to give the feedback, right? The wounded. I probably have seen more people wounded at work around lack of feedback than almost anything, in a way that they can do something with it. The other thing I would think about, and we'll talk about this in the role of church, is it's a hidden crisis that people want someone else to acknowledge before they acknowledge. So we have learned over the decades that addiction is something that the church can work with and address as a crisis, right? It's a crisis for the individual, it's a crisis for the family, and so we put tools and resources together, all right? There are homelessness, many things that we can do as a crisis in our society, right? Very few places in my experience, and yours may all be different, is that we see an opportunity for employment, work, performance discussions to support each other in that process. Instead, we want to put a Band-Aid on it and send people back to work. And I actually think, given where our world's going on employment, this is coming pretty fast at the church in terms of how do we facilitate. So some have facilitated employment in terms of job hunting, but how do we facilitate the fact that we are all growing and learning and facing difficult things at work and great things at work? How do we share that and facilitate that as a church? So back in the day when businesses, for example, were starting the whole diversity inclusion initiatives, the tagline was, bring your whole self to work, okay? We embrace you, bring your whole self to work. And work started to open up to this whole tapestry of experiences that people have. Some good at it, some not so good at it, but it was the tagline, okay? The reciprocal to that is, how do I bring my whole self to church so that I can prepare and be supported in order to bring my whole self, you know, whole and holy, right? Healthy back into work. And it's safe to compartmentalize because it's my one time not to think about the problems and the issues here. So it is bridging that gap to make that work for people. It also ties to that notion we started with, that some work to live and some live to work. And where you are on that spectrum also has a compartmentalization that feels good for some, right? So there's always a big question in the world of work. When something happens, who's responsible to address it, okay? It always starts there in terms of we do an investigation at work and there's a problem, an employee comes with a complaint. What's the best way to address that? Now I start with, what do I as an individual have to do first, okay? In balance with what's the organization responsible for, okay? Organization is responsible for clarity and culture and a process for me to raise an issue and non-judgmentalism when I do raise an issue. But I'm responsible for initiating that because I can't assume somebody else sees the cause of the issue, okay? The church also has that role in there around helping people my belief, understanding how to sort through those issues. But if we don't create a safe place for that to happen, and to Kirk's point, if we don't understand the work-church relationship, the church can talk about those things that are familiar in terms of forgiveness and reconciliation, but maybe not as much around the process for addressing an issue at work, because the person coming to you doesn't see that as the church's role. But if we start talking about broader topics, and I tried to create some constructs where I think churches that I've been in and churches that I attend, that there's a place for the spiritual side to help and to bond with the work side. It's in some constructs that already exist, but maybe not tied to the work environment, right? So we talk about understanding our theology around work and care and support. How do we bring that into the work conversations, okay? And if the first thing is we got to get people to see that work and church go together, they're not two separate boxes that we plunk into on a given day, we start to see that theology, I believe, can start tying that across, okay? So how I spend my time, what gifts and skills I have, what good leadership looks like, what good problem solving looks like, it all ties into that. The other piece I looked at on strategies was the support model. I would love to see a safe haven in churches around a place to talk about work. I don't know if that's a group or a class but it should be as legitimate as all the other groups we have going, and we have many, right? I mean, in the church I go to, there's 10 things going every night, okay? I can find very little on the world of work and a place to process that and a place to have that facilitated in terms of the opportunity. I've also been talking with a lot of pastors lately where their teaching model is purposely starting to include, what does a biblically based leader look like? How deep is that curriculum? What does a biblically based employee look like? What does conflict resolution look like when you're not across the table with somebody else with the same belief system, you know? What does influence look like? And I think about all the work we do in preparing missions to go overseas, right? Are we using that same to prepare missions to go into our work setting here, right? What's our aptitude for those things? I don't know. Maybe all your churches are doing that. I haven't found a lot in my neighborhood that are. So I practiced this with, I shared a few ideas with a group of women I had to my house a weekend ago. Okay, I was sharing some ideas, okay? As soon as I talked about woundedness at work, I heard 10 stories, just so you know, okay? And they were all legitimate. The strategy that resonated with most of them, and there were 6 of us, was I compartmentalize and I go to church to serve, not to be served, okay? And again, it's not in every church, okay? But the walk-in, the push, the sign-up, the need to. When is it okay to say no and not be labeled? Is there kind of a scorecard on serving? You know, well, okay, I signed up in my church 20 years ago to be on the funeral team, and I've never been asked to bake a cake because I don't think people know how I can bake a cake. But I got told I better sign up. okay? Then I signed up to teach a class. Didn't get to teach a class either, but, you know, it's that mentality of I better get my name on every list and I better be willing versus my skills are, and I'm here to also be ministered to and to grow and not have a scorecard. In the church I'm currently in, there's a response that somebody gets every time they say, we should do X, okay? We should start this, we should start that. And the consistent answer is, if you want to do that, make it happen. If you're called to do that, make it happen. Versus it becomes everyone's agenda to do more, right? Because then it's from the heart, right? You want a clothing drive, you want a soup kitchen, make it happen. Okay, every church is in a different place, every pastor's in a different place, every congregation's in a different place. So when I think about ideas, it also starts with you have to know, and the church has to know where you're at in that journey, okay? And they iterate. They're not straight lines. They're not, you know, one and done and we move on, because congregations change and leadership changes. So I appreciate that every church is in a different place, okay? I also appreciate that whatever is done for and by and to and with the congregants in a church, it has to be done with a genuine spirit seeped in the love of Jesus, okay? Okay, and I made that assumption in here, okay? So I appreciate that clarity. That's really good. I think that wherever you are on that spectrum in terms of interfacing with people and the topic of work has to be genuine. And to your earlier point, it has to bring the two worlds closer together with clarity, not separate from. And, you know, in terms of ideas, more isn't better. Less is often better in terms of what do we need from an infrastructure standpoint to work across a congregation and a future congregation. So I made some assumptions in there. Appreciate that clarity. I think the reality too is it takes so very little to show appreciation, to show connection, to show support, okay? That is especially important, in my opinion, at the tip of the iceberg, because it starts to open people up to something more. And that something more might be a flourishing relationship with Jesus. Hopefully it is. That also is healing in terms of the wounds that they're experiencing, okay? So if I'm working with somebody who has had a bad performance review, it takes one kind of light touch. If I'm working with somebody who has been severely harassed and or assaulted at work, which happens, okay? That touch is the beginning of that journey based on where we can go with it. But we spend a lot of time at work. And for most of us, it's our mission field, right? Or our opportunity to be our mission field, because we're praying for people and connecting with people. But that need to be in control and perfect with a group of believers is a killer. Is it okay to be raggedy? Do I have enough resilience to manage that a little bit, but to ask my tough questions and to be heard as a seeker of that answer versus a less than perfect believer? Because we are our own worst enemy on some of those things, right? But I think rest also gives you that resilience, that peace, that I might get to know some people sitting around me, and I'm probably going to trust one or two of them a little bit more.